I want to basically ask is, can the scientific arguments in the Quran, or let's just say in Abrahamic faiths, be used to counter or at least show the reality of God to atheists or non-believers or mesotheists in that regard?
I think that we have to have a sophisticated approach with it, and one of the important things that I think that Dawah is now catching on to is the changing nature of science. That science changes, okay, and this is, people don't realize that even what is referred to as scientific fact can change. The Dawah, the way it was being done in the last 20 or 30 years, didn't account for this very important fact, that what is referred to as scientific fact, that can change. Someone can say, well, this is a scientific fact, it won't change. But actually, there are things which are referred to as scientific facts which will change. So we can't put forward the idea that there's no scientific fact. There's no verse in the Quran or Hadith that goes against a scientific fact, because if a scientific fact is defined as something which doesn't change, something which can change, then there's no requirement for that to be the case. That's the first thing. Things which are observable sometimes have a higher epistemic value. Like, for example, if you look at the human being and the fact that, a very straightforward reality that the human being has eyes or something like this, or the fact that if I hold this phone and I drop it, if I let go of it, it will drop. These things will not change. But now the way I describe how that happens will change. So, for instance, theories of gravity will change depending on which time we're in, which epoch we're in. So we have to be sophisticated with this. What I think is the best way to kind of elaborate this is to say that the Quran has a unique, multidimensional way of dealing with naturalistic phenomena. So when it talks about nature, for example, naturalistic phenomena, it does it in a way which people in the 7th century all the way through to the 21st century can understand, and can correlate it with a model that they have. Okay, they can correlate with the model that they have. And so obviously from that perspective, there's currency there. And we would say that the Quran, from all the ancient religions or comparative to them, has the best propensity to do so. So, for example, if we look at the Old Testament, the argument can easily be made that the authorship is stuck in the epoch of whatever it is, century, that the Old Testament was written or codified. But the Quran seems to speak in ways which go beyond the 7th century narrative. And I think the best example of this is embryology. Like, people talk about embryology and the scientific miracle. I wouldn't put it in that language. But I think when we talk about embryology, right, in the Quran and the Sunnah, it can easily be conceived in a way which is concurrent with modern biological understandings and with like the medieval understandings of the 7th century, for example, and all that which is in between. So from that perspective, the Quran seems to have more of a propensity to speak to people in different epochs when it comes to naturalistic phenomena. And I think that we have to couch our language in language of sophistication and nuance, rather than couching the language with certainties and scientific miracles and this and that. I think that's really academically doesn't stack up. The argument will not be as potent. So from that angle, I think the multidimensional view, is very good. And you can use a few examples. And I like to use a few examples. Like, as I've just mentioned, some of the things in the embryological corpus when it comes to Islam, easily can be understood in both. Like, for example, I just filmed a video this week. There's a very famous hadith which people have understanding incorrectly, which talks about إِذَا عَلَى مَاءَ الرَّجُلِ if the man's fluid dominates the woman's fluid, then the appearance will be according to that. And if the woman's fluid, dominates, etc., then the appearance will be more of the mother. People have translated this as if the woman ejaculates first. Well, that's not the correct translation, because the word for ejaculation is imna', right? And that's not mentioned in any of the alfaz of the hadith, any of the language of the hadith. The word that's mentioned, which is Ibn Hajar, he says this is the right riwayah, is the word ala, which is in the Quran, in Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse number 91. مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Ala means to dominate. So if there was more than one God, they would have tried to dominate each other. So here, this hadith is talking about fluids dominating one another. Now, we speak in the 21st century in language of dominant genes, dominant and recessive genes. It's very easy to correlate this hadith with that, extremely easily, especially when you have another hadith which talks about, you know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's talking to a man, not some Zayd, but there was a man who came, a Sahabi who's unnamed actually in the hadith, and he had a black son. He had a black son, and then, you know, the black son, you know, obviously he's not black himself, and his wife is not black. Otherwise, this would not have been strange for him. And he said, "How could that be the case? That he has a black, you know, I've got a black son." And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to him, "Look, have you got camels?" He said, "Yeah." "What color are the camels?" He said, "Red." He said, "Do you have grey camels?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "How comes?" He said, "La'allahu naz'atu arq." It could be because there's some kind of ancestral lineage. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yeah, naz'at arq. He said, maybe it's because your son is also the ancestral lineage. So here you have this idea of recessive genes in modern parlance, which are kind of represented somewhere along the lineage of the family of the person. Like, for example, I'm 6'6". My mom and dad are not 6'6". Now they're not even anywhere close to that. But some great granddad might have been 6'6" or 6'7", and then I might have had the tall gene or whatever that's passed down.
Or it could be you studying Lamarckism.
Yeah, or playing for basketball or something in another life. But whatever it is, right? The point is that when you put all these hadiths together, it's easy to conclude, okay, well, this is understandable from our modern perspective. For instance, another hadith, beautiful hadith, easy, simple. The Prophet said, the walad, the born child, is not from the entirety of the fluid. Simple hadith. There's no it's clear, right?
That's why children resemble their mothers as well.
Yeah, children can resemble their mothers. It's not because it's the misunderstanding is that, oh, because she ejaculates first. No one is saying that. It's talking about ala. It's talking about domination. So the fluid has some components within it which dominate components within the other fluid, and we know it's a mixture of the fluids because it's nutfa amshaj. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. In chapter 76, verse number 2. You know, we have created the human being from a mixture of fluids, so that we may test him who made him hearing and seeing. So you have this mixture of fluids, and it's not the entirety of the fluid which the child is from, because we know it's on one cell from each for the fertilization to take place. So we can actually put all of that in sequential form, and it can make sense to a 21st century audience without having to do hermeneutical acrobatics or something like that. But it would have made sense to the people in the 7th century.
That's a really nice word.
Right? You know what I mean? So it's and that's what we believe the multidimensional thing is that, look, even if you wanted to subject it to our current kind of observable understandings, it wouldn't be ridiculous to do so. Like, we can understand these ahadith in light of 21st century understandings, but a 7th century person would have understood it in their own way, and that would have been fine for them as well. And that's the beauty and the miracle there, in the multi-dimensional and timeless nature of the Quranic discourse when it relates to naturalism. Not because of some kind of false requirement for all of the verses of nature in the Quran to match with whatever model that they have of the day. This is not the requirement.
Jazakallah khair, brother Mahdi Raza, for joining us today.